What about Al Jazeera? What about Al Jazeera in the case of Libya, for example? Do you think the channel has been too one-sided supporting the revolution? Some analysts have alleged that.
Well, a lot of people feel that way, in part because, at the very beginning of the conflict, an Al Jazeera cameraman who's from Qatar, was shot and killed by Libyan forces. And this had a big reaction emotionally in Doha, the capital of Qatar, a big funeral for him. He was very well known. And so the Qatar government had joined the NATO forces, whether that was the reason or not remains to be seen, but they seem to have a closer relationship, or have had in the past, with with Bashir in Syria. So they don't seem to be as critical. On the other hand, the Syrians have not let Al Jazeera correspondents in. So their own media policy may be working against them.
But do you think then that that Al Jazeera's coverage of Libya is influenced by Qatar's support of the rebels?
Well, they would deny it. A lot of people think it may be. I don't watch it enough to know, but there's definitely been shall we say, a bias in support of the rebels there, without the kind of critical reporting that we've seen in other countries. There's also criticism of Al Jazeera coverage of Bahrain, in part because the emir of Qatar is, and the Gulf states are very nervous about what's happening there will soon be happening in their own countries. So yes, everybody has interests to defend and protect, and sometimes they spill over to the way media covers an event or doesn't cover it.
And I just want to bring in, just to kind of give an example, one report took aim at Congressman Dennis Kucinich. It was titled "Secret Files: U.S. Officials Aided Gaddafi." And to cite a little bit of that report, if we could bring it up, it was citing, it said it appears Welch, who is a former Bush official, was not the only prominent American giving help to Gaddafi, as NATO and the rebel army were locked in battle with his regime. On the floor of the intelligence chief's office lay an envelope addressed to Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. Inside, I found what appears to be a summary of a conversation between U.S. Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who publicly opposed U.S. policy on Libya, and an intermediary for the Libyan leader's son. And that report goes on, but the allegation is that Congressman Kucinich was helping Gaddafi. Was this a smear piece?
Said Griffin also reminded him that the channel was part of the establishment, so he must conduct himself accordingly. This is not the first time a journalist has accused MSNBC of applying subtle yet clear pressure to shape its political programming. Jessica Yellen covered the White House for MSNBC and ABC News in 2002 and 2003 at the outset of the Iraq War. In 2008, she told Anderson Cooper that news executives meddled with how she covered the war.
I think the press corps dropped the ball at the beginning. When the lead up to war began, the press corps was under enormous pressure from corporate executives, frankly, to make sure that this was a war that was presented in a way that was consistent with the patriotic fever in the nation and the president's high approval ratings. And my own experience at the White House was that the higher the president's approval ratings, the more pressure I had from news executives, and I was not at this network at the time, but the more pressure I had from news executives to put on positive stories about the president. I think over time,
really? You had pressure from news executives to put on positive stories about the president?
Not in that exact, they wouldn't say it in that way, but they would edit my pieces, they would push me in different directions, they would turn down stories that were more critical and try to put on pieces that were more positive. Yes, that was my experience.
And in that case, she was talking about the Bush administration. That was Jessica Yellen, former White House correspondent for MSNBC. We invited MSNBC to join us today, but they declined. In December of last year, Phil Donahue joined Eliot Spitzer and Kathleen Parker on their show to discuss his ouster from MSNBC. During the run-up to the invasion of Iraq, Donahue was the lone journalist daring to publicly oppose the war at its onset.
I opposed the war.
And was that one of the reasons they pushed you off?
Oh, read the memo published by the New York Times. So Donahue's anti-war voice is not going to work against the flag waving on the other station. Donahue, an anti-war voice in 2002. Remember, they're all doing what I did then now. I mean, the whole channel is now. You could not criticize this war 4 months before the invasion. It was not good for business. General Electric had no interest in featuring an old talk show host who was against the president's war. It was unpopular. You weren't American. This is what you get with corporate media. It's going to happen again.
Cenk Uygur, does your situation compare to that of Phil Donahue's? Do you think Al Sharpton would take a very different political line than you would?
So there's a couple of different things here. First of all, it's not just Phil Donahue. I had Jesse Ventura on the Young Turks a little while ago, maybe over a year ago. And what people don't remember is that he also had a big contract from MSNBC at the time to do a show. And they told him, you know what? It's okay. Take the money. You don't even have to do the show. Why? He said they found out that he was against the Iraq war and said, that's okay. We don't want you on air then. Okay? And Ashley Banfield, when she gave a great speech in Kansas about how the war didn't make any sense, she went from their star reporter to literally being moved into a closet. And they wouldn't even let her out of her contract so she can go on another network and talk. It was unbelievable. Now, the distinction there is Donahue, Ventura, Banfield were all under different management at MSNBC. So you have to be clear on that, and you can't put that on them. But the similarity is that it is corporate media, right? And whether it's the pressure to go right, the pressure to go left, pressure to appease the Bush administration, or pressure to appease the Obama administration, it exists.
Is that I agree with him on, but this is classic Washington conventional wisdom thinking that he's about to display here. First clip.
Over the last week, liberal politicians and commentators in America took to the airwaves and op-ed pages to criticize the debt deal that Congress reached. But their ire was directed not at the Tea Party or even the Republicans, but rather at Barack Obama, who they concluded had failed as a president because of his persistent tendency to compromise. This has been a running theme ever since Obama took office. I think that liberals need to grow up.
I think you need to grow up, and I think all of Washington needs to grow up. Listen, we're not kids. Don't talk down to us like we're stupid. We've been right about every single thing, and you've been wrong in Washington about every single thing. Now, I said that President Obama would get a terrible deal in the tax cuts, and he did. He gave away 100% of the store. The Bush tax cuts were for the rich were completely and utterly maintained. That was 100 to nothing. What did he get in return? The START Treaty? Now, Freed, you don't know that the Republicans originally were in favor of the START Treaty, and they were in favor of it all along? That was an obvious negotiation tactic. You know, here's something you could do, Freed, for example, not fantasies of stirring speeches. You go, oh, you know what? You want to go for the tax cuts for the rich? Have at it, Hoss. You want to stop the START Treaty so that we cannot verify Russia's nuclear weapons? Have at it, Hoss. Let's take our case to the American people. I bet I win. I bet the American people don't want loose nukes in Russia, and I bet that they're not in favor of the tax cuts for rich. Well, how do I know that? Because every poll shows about 70 to 80% of Americans say, hey, you know what, we should increase taxes on the rich and get rid of those Bush tax cuts. You see, a strong president doesn't need to give fantastic speeches. He just needs to say, this is my position, it is backed by the American people, and I am sticking to it. And if you counter me, no problem, but you will have a political price to pay. That's politics 101. If you don't understand that, you don't understand anything about politics. Please stop talking about it.
I'm thinking of doing a 1-hour special, maybe next week, on the life and times of Michael Weiner. Little Weiner, Weiner Nation. Calls himself Savage, but he changed his name. You can't blame him. I mean, he's named after male genitalia. He is a real cancer on this business. He is a phony, fake conservative. All you have to do is Google his name, Google Allen Ginsberg, Google Fiji, all kinds of stuff pops up. You know, he goes on the airwaves and he trashes a couple of my friends, Rush and Sean, claiming they're not conservative enough, you know, like him. I don't know, I've never seen Weiner Nation at a Tea Party rally. I never seen Weiner Nation helping the conservative movement. I know he has done a real shakedown operation. I mean, I know he set up a legal defense fund because he's so poor. He needs his listeners to help pay for him because the big bad British government won't let him in Britain. I mean, who the hell even wants to go there? But that's beside the point. He's such a victim. Let me tell you something, you You little troll. You little nobody. I can do it again, Snaggletooth.
Ten-foot rifle. And yes, the conspiracy theory about the government having too many bullets is nuts. But it's not out of nowhere. That conspiracy theory comes from the mother of all conspiracy theories that seduce Republicans. It's an internet talk show called InfoWars. Yes, this is the same guy who has been selling the idea that the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School and the massacre at Aurora, Colorado were actually fake. They were faked as an excuse to take away our guns and enslave us to the giant wasps who hive beneath the UN building or whatever. It's the same guy who says the Boston bombing was also fake. It was faked for political purposes. The same guy who says he doesn't believe the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster actually happened. He doesn't believe there was actually an Oklahoma City bombing. Naturally, of course, he also knows and sells the idea that 9/11 was an inside job. So that landing gear, that must be faked too. The conspiracy continues. In every tragedy, the InfoWars Alex Jones world thinks they see a conspiracy. Monday's devastating, record-breaking tornado in Moore, Oklahoma killed 24 people and flattened a community. Just devastating. Devastating, right? But now, I am not kidding, these same conspiracy theory folks are peddling the idea that the tornado was a conspiracy as well. Seriously, the tornado was a conspiracy.
And, tornadoes are way down. Of course, they lie and say they're way up to try to get carbon taxes. But I don't know if this was a weather weapon or not, but they can, with the right weather conditions, they can create and steer groups of tornadoes. Did people 50 miles out as these storm systems, did they see aircraft in and around the clouds spraying and doing things? If you saw that, you better bet your bottom dollar they did this. But who knows if they did? That's the thing.
Who knows? Who knows if the U.S. government uses a secret made-up weather weapon that only exists in the mind of, I mean, that's the thing, right? Here's the other thing. Alex Jones should be disqualified from participating in Republican Party politics. His crackpot theories shouldn't prompt actual hearings in Congress, and they shouldn't inspire actual legislation in Congress, and you shouldn't do a money bomb on his show when you are running for Congress. Do not fundraise on this theater of the absurd by showing yourself to be one with this guy, really. He says the tornado was a conspiracy. The tornado. Can we agree that it's over now? Republicans going on his show? Really? Can we agree?
Newsweek's Lisa Miller, who is a repeat offender, helms a column every week called Belief Watch, as if she's on the top of a building every week with a rifle and a scope, watching your belief. She has used her column to, among other things, characterize students at a Christian college as fanatical, fundamentalist, cultural crusaders. She has criticized Pope Benedict for being ugly, not in character, in visage, his face, ugly. She's claimed that the Bible actually supports gay marriage if you read it right. And she pens an annual hottest rabbis list. This is Newsweek's resident religion scholar.